seen it twice so far, and I'm currently writing a review. Not that that actually matters, because by the time anyone eventually sees this, possibly sees this, I would probably have made that review, and it will have been 7 months since then. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Godzilla, because that makes sense. It is very topical, or it would be if there weren't so many other blockbusters premiering this year and just taking precedence, you know. But there is in fact a movie about Godzilla coming out later this year, 2019. Godzilla, King of the Monsters. It is the sequel to Godzilla from 5 years ago, from 2014. So let's just talk a little bit about that, because it feels like people have forgotten it completely, which, I mean, isn't hard to understand, because, well, it didn't make much of an impact. But anyway, without further ado, let's spit some facts. Godzilla came out in 2014 as a game. No, the movie premiered in 2014. It has a runtime of 2 hours and 3 minutes. It was directed by Gareth Edwards, who you might know. Well, you might know his work, because he's the one who directed Rogue One, a Star Wars story. That was actually Godzilla was his second feature film that he directed. So I think Rogue One was his third, which is pretty impressive. Godzilla, the character, was created by a Japanese studio called Toho back in the 50s. We'll get into that later. But for Godzilla 2014, the story and screenplay were written by Dave Callahan and Max Borenstein, not sure. Dave Callahan wrote the story apparently, and Max Borenstein wrote the screenplay. On IMDb it has a rating of 6.4, which is pretty bad. And I mean, like I said, it's not a fantastic movie. It's not perfect in any way. But it's not bad. It's not like the 1998 American Godzilla, which was absolutely horrendous, and actually has like, I don't know, 5.4, 5.6, something like that on IMDb, which is really bad. But I think still 6.4. It could have, I mean, it could be a little have a better rating, a little bit better at least. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has an average of 70.5%. So I think the critics gave it a 75% fresh rating, and fans gave it a 66% rating. So, well, apparently it's more liked by critics, which is surprising. Maybe it's not actually, because fans are usually very critical when it comes to their, well, favorite properties being adapted to film. So what I would like, things I'd like to talk about regarding this movie is first just the monster itself, Godzilla, as the monster that he, well, is supposed to be, the character of Godzilla. And then I'd like to talk about the evolution of sort of Godzilla, the character, but the property, the presence, or I can't find the word to describe it, but you know, he's a figure in pop culture, and I want to talk a little bit about how he's evolved through the years since his first appearance in the Japanese film which I apologize, but I'm gonna do it anyway, I guess, because it's the original. That's what it's called. I can't call it Gojira because that would be ridiculous. And they don't really have English titles that make sense, at least. It'd just be wrong. Anyway, the one from 2014, which is of course actually called Godzilla, except for when he first appears, because then Ken Watanabe's character, who is, let's see, what's it called? Something like Ishiro Serizawa, something like that. I think the name of his character is. He recognizes the monster from his previous research, and in the script he was supposed to say, like, when they're like, "Oh, what is that?" He's supposed to say Godzilla, but he insisted that it would be better if he used the original Japanese pronunciation, Japanese name for the monster. So he did, which I think is way better. It makes way more sense that it actually used the original name. So it's like, oh, what is that? Gojira. Sorry. So in the movie, Godzilla is about 355 feet tall, which translates into about 108 meters, which is, obviously it's huge for a living being, and that's kind of the point, of Godzilla and such characters. But it's also the almost the biggest Godzilla, the biggest incarnation of Godzilla in live action movies. I think it's the second biggest, and the only one that's actually bigger is the Shin Godzilla from the 2016 Japanese movie Shin Gojira, which is in that film he is 118 meters tall, so 10 meters taller, which is about 30 feet, I think. So in that movie also is it's a very different movie, Shin Gojira. Oh my god, I'm gonna get so much hate. Well, good thing no one will watch this. So anyway, he's 108 meters tall in this one, the one from 2014. To make him appear the way they wanted him to appear, the team, the production team, the technical team, well, first of all, the monster itself, the character was a beast to render in the computer animation, because of course he is computer animated. Actually, I'll get to this later, comparing the original Godzilla to this one. But anyway, he was in. He's only in 11 minutes of the film, but in those 11 minutes, there are 327 shots of him, and they all had to be rendered and everything, which took a long time, and I'm not exactly sure how computer animation works, so I can't explain it in a way that will be satisfactory, but still, huge character, huge item to render in the computer. So it took a long time, basically. I don't know what the point of that was. Let's move on to give a sense of like the volume of him, quite literally the volume, how loud the character of Godzilla would be. The sound department used a huge speaker that was physically enormous, to just blast the sound, blast Godzilla's roar, his iconic roar. I mean, well, it is iconic, well, regardless of whether you can actually hear it in your head just by hearing it be mentioned. I can, but I've actually, studied these things, kind of. I've done research, at least. But, yeah, so pretty much his, well, it's the most epic, well, one of the most epic live-action adaptations of the character to date. And I'm actually pretty excited for the sequel to come out, because he will be fighting iconic Godzilla villains like, well, of course, Rodan will be in it, and King Ghidorah, or King Ghidra. So I think that's how it's pronounced originally. Again, sorry. Also, Mothra will be in it, which is kind of cool. But it's, well, it's such an enormous scale, basically, all of these creatures coming together. And, yeah, well, all of it, like I said, biggest Godzilla to date, second biggest. And, well, I'm sort of glad they actually decided to make him that big, because, well, that's kind of the point of these movies, isn't it? You want to see something, you want to see a huge monster just wreaking havoc, fighting, other monsters. If it was just some little, little runt, well, then the whole point would sort of, the whole awe factor of it, if that's an understandable way to describe it. Well, yeah. It would be lost on the audience. So I think, like, the bigger the better. Like, if you remember, or if you've seen or even heard of the movie Cloverfield from 2008, in that film there's this new monster which didn't exist in any previous media. Godzilla is, of course, a very old, well, pretty old, I mean, it's from the 50s, the character of Godzilla, the concept, so we know what Godzilla is like, we know what to expect, just like with King Kong. But when it comes to Cloverfield, J.J. Abrams was a major producer. Of course, J.J. Abrams made Star Wars The Force Awakens. He will be directing Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And also, he did Star Trek. You know who he is, basically. So he was a major producer behind Cloverfield. He wanted a new monster, an American, sort of an American, patriotic, no, not like that, but just didn't want to actually be, well, still be, Godzilla is a Japanese character, so regardless of what sort of American adaptation is made out of him, there will always be, well, it won't be original for America, it won't be iconic for the nation. So, for Cloverfield, J.J. Abrams wanted to make a whole new monster. So I made Cloverfield, which, I mean, it's not as charming a monster, if you get what I'm saying. Godzilla is still, I mean, it's a very iconic shape. It's a big lizard, big dinosaur, pretty much. And that's like a very cool looking design, very cool premise. Cloverfield is just like a huge and disgusting, but really, really terrifying in the film. Let's see, what was my point with that? Right, Cloverfield is huge. I mean, he's slightly bigger than, well, Cloverfield, I don't know if that's actually Clover is is what they called the monster. Not quite sure why it's called, why the franchise consisting of 3 movies right now is called Cloverfield, but well, that's the way it is. Also, the monster itself, Clover, hasn't really been seen since Cloverfield in 2008. My point about that, again, was that the monster in Cloverfield is apparently just like an infant. It's like a recently hatched creature, basically. Recently hatched specimen of its kind, which is terrifying because you can only imagine how huge it would be when it's fully grown. And actually, in the latest Cloverfield movie, the Cloverfield Paradox, which I haven't seen and I probably won't because it's not my type of movie, you can see a fully grown in, like, I don't know if it's the end shot or if it's like a post-credit scene, but you can see a specimen. You can see the monster rising up above the clouds, which is absolutely terrifying because that means it has to be huge. Let's get back to Godzilla. An interesting fact about in this movie, in Godzilla from 2014, Godzilla fights 2 huge insect-like monsters called Mutos. That's what they're called by Monarch, the organization that keeps track of all these monsters. He fights them. They're trying to breed, but they're like, I don't know, they're enemies basically. Their species have been enemies for a long time, and they're the first like original American Godzilla monsters, Godzilla antagonists. But in this, in the film, in Godzilla, they are like found on. They're hatched from. No, not hatched. I'm not quite sure, but how it works. It was a long time since I saw it. But still, they're found in connection to to a big skeleton of another creature, just like Godzilla, of his species, and it's believed that the 2 races, well, 2 species, the Godzillas and the Mutos, were like, you know, at odds with one another, and almost all of them went extinct, and like Godzilla is the last one of his kind left because the Mutos killed the rest, which well, first of all, it's very different from Godzilla's previous origins, because then he has always been the only one of his kind, because he's like created from radioactive fallout from the atomic bombs dropped on Japan. It was kind of a response, kind of a way to process well, the atomic bombs being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But then again, I'll get to that later. An interesting similarity about his species being killed by rival species is that a similarity is to Kong's origins in Kong Skull Island, which takes place in the same universe, in the like monsterverse, which they're trying to create, trying to establish. But in Kong Skull Island, it's revealed that King Kong, like Kong himself, is not called King Kong in the movie; it's just called Kong. He is the last of his kind, because all the rest were killed by the skull crawlers, which is like his rival species on Skull Island. So that's just, I don't know, I don't really have an opinion on the fact that their origins are very similar. I think it makes sense. Whatever. I don't think anyone really cares. I mean, two superheroes having the same origin story. It might seem a bit derivative, but four species battling another species. That's just the law of nature. So anyway, okay, this is getting boring. Let's move on to Godzilla as a character and the property of Godzilla, the concept, the cultural presence of him. Because, and like I said, I'm gonna compare him to. I'm gonna compare the 2014 Godzilla to the original one from the movie Godzilla from 1954. Basically how he's evolved and changed since his inception into pop culture. First of all, the way he is created in the movie, not like canonically how the beast is created, but the way he's made for the movie is of course different, because now in this day and age we have access to computer animation and CGI and such. In 2014 he is made through computer animation, a bit of motion capture, and in fact Andy Serkis, who we all know as the king of motion capture, who played Gollum, plays Snoke in what's it called, in Star Wars, obviously. He played King Kong in Peter Jackson's King Kong from 2005. He was on set consulting during the creation of Godzilla 2014 to make sure that the motion capture was done correctly, I suppose, or done in the best way possible. Of course, it was only partially motion captured. A lot of it was just computer animation, and that differs a lot from the original version, where he is just a guy in a rubber suit who's like walking around in a model of Tokyo. I think it's Tokyo, yeah, and tearing it down basically. And of course, we don't really have a reason to use that sort of technique anymore, because it's a lot easier and I think a lot cheaper. It requires a lot less, at least, to just animate it instead of having to build an entire set and then tearing it down. So that's understandable, but still, rubber suits and suits, to make monsters is still a technique being used for, Chewbacca, I think, is the best example. That's still a guy in a suit. And R2D2 was also a little. It was a little. Oh my god, I was about to say something terribly offensive. But it was Kenny Baker was his name. He's passed away now. But it was the original R2D2. I think he was 1 meter and 12 centimeters tall. He was, I'm not sure about the politically correct way to say it. He was a dwarf. He size to fit in the costume, well, in the suit of R2D2. So I'm not sure that's how they do it now, because well, R2D2 hasn't really been a major character in any of the previous in any of the recent films. But well, I don't know. Still, they use it for Chewbacca, and a lot of large, weird-looking characters are motion capture nowadays. Like in Kong Skull Island, there was a guy doing the motion capture for Kong. It wasn't a guy in a suit like was in 1976. Back then, it was a suit. In '33, when they made like the first King Kong movie, it was just a puppet. At least I think it was just a puppet. A lot of it was a puppet. They thought about using a real gorilla, actually, and have it fight a real Komodo dragon to like make it look like, you know, Kong was fighting a huge lizard. And of course that would have been animal cruelty, so it's a good thing they didn't do that. But it's just, you know, kind of interesting that they would have made that work. So then again, back then, King Kong was a puppet and used stop motion to make him move around and everything. Then in '76 was a guy in a suit. In 2005, it was Andy Serkis in motion capture gear, and then in what year was it? 2016, I think. Yeah, when Kong Skull Island came out, I think that was 2016. Well, then it was motion capture as well. I can't remember the name of the guy who did it, but well, that was it. So, Godzilla motion capture in 2014. That was the point, not a rubber suit. A similarity to the original Godzilla is that Godzilla is covered in scars and stuff. But it was covered in scars and stuff back then as well. It looked very, you know, jagged, sort of. And back then, the scars came from radioactivity and like being blasted with nukes. So that had, you know, a logical explanation. In this version, we can only presume that he has scars from like battles and stuff when he's fought other big creatures, because he's an ancient. In this version, this version of Godzilla is like an ancient apex predator, as opposed to being like a mutated reptile from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So they sort of changed the purpose of it. Well, the message, the underlying message of the film, of the character, because here's where it gets kind of interesting. Finally, like I said earlier, the 1954 version was sort of a response, if you will, a way to characterize, to embody to personify the fallout from the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bombs falling on Japan, devastating the country, killing, you know, millions, I guess. I think it must be millions, right? I really should look up the numbers. In this movie, it's instead the director himself, Gareth Edwards, said that he's supposed to embody the wrath of nature, sort of nature rising up, fighting back against humanity, which I mean is a pretty cool message. Sorry, I hit the table. Like, you know, we're polluting the oceans and destroying the environment, and then boom comes this big monster, like knocks down buildings. So that's, you know, it's cool that they can actually change and adapt the message of the character, the metaphor, to fit different purposes, I suppose. But then also one major thing that changed, that has changed throughout the years really, is that like the character of Godzilla and his motivation, his role basically in the narrative. Because in this movie, in 2014, Godzilla fights the Mutos, which are pretty much the bad guys. They're the ones wreaking havoc across America, and Godzilla is the one stopping them. Now, of course, he destroys a lot of stuff as well, but he's sort of an anti-hero, or even a good guy, maybe a protagonist. I just got a text message. God, I'm popular. Yeah, that has changed majorly, because when he first appeared in 1954, he was the antagonist. He was the one destroying the city. He just rose up from the ocean and started tearing down Tokyo, just sort of wreaking havoc, and the government had to put a stop to him, instead of him putting a stop to not the government but the other threat. And that's pretty much the whole purpose of King of Monsters later this year, to you know, him stopping the greater evil, which I suppose will be King Ghidorah. So it's interesting actually how like the purpose has changed, because how his role, how his stance has changed, because he was made to be a bad guy, sort of. He was made to be the villain, but then he quickly turned into like the good guy, and fighting other monsters, trying to destroy, all of them, trying to destroy the world. And I could write a whole essay about that, and I might in the future, who knows. But there's something about the audience, I mean us as an audience, we want to see the good guy. Basically, we want Godzilla to be the good guy. We want King Kong to be the good guy, and that's why they're turned into good guys, I think. Because like Godzilla, the one from '54, had about 30 sequels, and in the rest of them he was kind of a good guy, because we want to relate to him. We don't want him to be the bad guy, just like we don't want King Kong to be the bad guy. So in the original King Kong versions, he's you know, he tears down buildings, he fights the military, but in recent version, mainly in Skull Island, he's sort of the good guy, protecting humans from the other monsters. And also you can see that in, for example, the term, actually, you know what, the Terminator, I'll just use that as the last example. He's a bad guy in the first movie, and then in the second movie, he's pretty much, he is a good guy. So how quickly it can change, because we want this cool character to be on our side. And like I said, I might expand upon that in the future. I don't know if it'll be in this format, in this medium, but I think it's really interesting, and if I can find people who are interested in hearing it, I will, I'll tell them all about it. Also, also Godzilla has changed in the fact, well, in the sense that when he first appeared, he was much more slim, slimmer. Now he's stockier, he's bulkier, which makes more anatomical sense. But a lot of Japanese people were outraged apparently by this film, while American audiences weren't. And yeah, I guess that'll be my last fact, because it's time to stop. It's time to put an end to this madness. So I'm thinking I might try to do more sort of informative videos in the future, because it could actually be interesting to listen to this actively instead of it just being me rambling. Although I don't have a lot of spare time to actually do this, so rambling is probably all I can provide for now. But you know, I don't think a lot of people will be sad about that, because I'm mainly making this for myself anyway. Let's not contemplate existential questions and think about the purpose of existence and everything. Instead, let's drift off to sleep or